I'm a 33-year-old woman, and I haven't spoken to my parents for the past 3 years. The fallout started when my younger brother, who is 30, convinced our parents not to invest in my business. He did this at the last minute, leaving me without investors after I had already quit my job. Frankly, I hate my brother, not just because of this incident, but because I've always known that my parents love him more than me. Growing up, it was clear he was the golden child while I was just there. My parents are immigrants, and in our culture, men are treated like kings. We were never treated equally, and they didn't even try to hide it. It was always obvious that he came first. My parents are extremely traditional and believe a woman's only roles are household chores, marriage, and having babies. I've always known they wanted a son first, but got me instead. While my parents weren't outright cruel, their treatment made their feelings clear. There was always a bias in favor of my brother. It probably wouldn't be as bad if he weren't such a huge jerk, but unfortunately, he was. He knew my parents loved him more and took full advantage of it. He always stole the spotlight whenever I achieved something. For instance, on my 18th birthday, he decided to announce that he was dating a college senior and planning to drop out of high school to live with her. Naturally, this sent my parents into a frenzy. Even though none of it was true, he ruined my birthday that day. You can imagine the kind of person he is. Horrible, and I despise him to this day. Once I moved out for college, I didn't look back. I only came home when absolutely necessary. My parents didn't seem to miss me much either. They had their golden child, and that was all that mattered. When my brother moved out for college, he got a bigger farewell than I ever did. My goodbye party was small, just family and a few friends, while they threw him a huge bash and even rented a restaurant for the occasion. I never had any expectations from my parents. I knew once I became an adult, I was on my own. The only reason I was able to attend college was because of my dad's wealth. I was actually pretty glad they were financially well off because, to them, sending me to college was a huge waste of money. They expected me to get married and start a family after graduating. However, I begged them to let me go, promising eternal gratitude. I believe they paid for my education to have some control over me. I graduated from business school and was a great student, so finding a job wasn't difficult. Once I started earning, I told my parents I'd pay them back, but not anytime soon. They were disappointed because they thought I'd immediately start looking for a husband to settle down. My mom was still opposed to me working and insisted it was safer to get married quickly. She feared that if I became older and richer, no man would want to marry me. Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare, and it pretty much was. My parents were raised with these beliefs and never unlearned them. I explained to my mom that times were changing and that being independent was more important to me than starting a family. They were mad for a few weeks, but when they saw it didn't affect me, we returned to a civil relationship. I began repaying my debt with my stable job and decent income. After living frugally for a few years, I paid off my entire debt. After that, I saw no point in maintaining a close relationship with my parents because it was clear my brother was their priority. We'd occasionally meet for lunches or at family gatherings, but once my debt was paid, I visited them less. Being around them was suffocating since they constantly pressured me to find a husband and get married. Another reason I reduced visits was their constant bragging about my brother, who also graduated from business school but was a terrible student. He partied away his years and only got a job because my dad hired him out of obligation. They never bragged about me, even though I held a higher position and earned more. My brother couldn't find a job on his own, and yet they still boasted about him. The only reason I stayed in touch was because I owed them money. After repaying my debt, I focused more on my work, and we grew apart. A few years later, a coworker and I decided to start our own business. We worked out everything before approaching my parents for investment. I wanted to present myself as a businesswoman, not just their daughter. Though my parents and I were barely speaking, I knew my dad's business acumen could help us. My partner also thought it was a great idea, and they were our safest bet. When I approached my parents, they were impressed with our business plan. They didn't find it awkward that I came to them for business purposes after years of distance. They respected that it was purely a transaction. I don't think they would have agreed to invest in my business if it hadn't been a brilliant idea. It's pretty obvious they didn't care that I was their daughter, but my dad liked the idea of making more money, which is why he agreed. Unfortunately, it was just a verbal agreement, and he said he'd only proceed with legal paperwork after his lawyers did due diligence, and we had something more tangible than just business plans. So, for months, my partner and I continued working at our jobs while also developing our business. We had a couple of potential investors, but my parents were willing to make the biggest investment, so we worked hard to impress them and keep them on board. After months of effort and with 75% of the work done, I approached my father again. He was impressed and finally agreed to the paperwork. My partner and I put in our 2 weeks' notice the day after my dad said he'd invest and write us a check soon. But that never happened. A couple of days later, my parents called me back and said they had reconsidered and were not willing to invest anymore. I felt like my world had ended. I couldn't believe they were leaving me out to dry. When I asked why they suddenly thought it was a bad idea, they revealed that my brother had told them my business wasn't investable and would fail. My dad backed out solely based on his word. I was shocked and asked why my brother hadn't said anything before. My dad said my brother had been thinking about it for a while, but wanted to see what I would come up with before deciding. I realized my brother hadn't been genuinely thinking about it. He had waited until I had done most of the work to sabotage me at the last minute. He played his cards right to leave me in a difficult position. I threw a fit at my parents' house that day, told them to go jump off a cliff, and said horrible things about them and my brother. Then I went home to regroup. I couldn't let my partner down, so I told him what happened. He consoled me and suggested we take back our resignations if the company would have us. But I wasn't willing to go back. We started looking for other investors, selling our business idea hard and pitching to anyone who would listen. After a few weeks, we managed to secure a couple of investors who gave us the funding we desperately needed. We started building our business from the ground up. The first few months were the most difficult, with lots of work and sleepless nights, wondering if we were doing the right thing. But a few days later, we broke even and have been going strong ever since. There has been no looking back, thanks to the hard work my partner and I put in. My brother's cunning plan couldn't stop me because it was my destiny to be successful. The only good thing that came out of it was that I no longer had to pretend to be on good terms with my family. I had given them a chance to invest because I thought they were my safest bet, but I forgot how conniving my brother was. They didn't deserve to be part of my success, and I'm glad they didn't invest. They never apologized for letting me down, and we never spoke after I stormed out of their house. I'm low-key glad they didn't reach out to me after that. I wouldn't even know what to say to them. However, recently they got back in touch because they wanted to invest in my business. Now that we're doing well, everybody wants to be part of this. A few days ago, on a Sunday, they showed up at my place. I've been living in the same apartment since I graduated from college, so it was easy for them to find me. Seeing them standing outside my door took me aback. It had been almost 3 years since the incident, and they never tried to contact me. I opened the door and let them in, hoping they were there to apologize and make amends. But I was wrong. They only wanted to tell me they knew my business was doing well and now wanted to invest. They didn't even try to make small talk or ask how I was doing. They got straight to the point, which I appreciated because it saved time. It was funny how optimistic they were, expecting me to agree and let them invest. I laughed in their faces and told them that wasn't happening and they could leave. My father looked shocked and struggled to find words. He turned red and said I had no right to insult him since he was my father and deserved respect. I told them I was showing them the same amount of respect they had shown me. I reminded him he was here as an investor and businessman, not as my father. My parents were scandalized and wanted to argue, but I wasn't in the mood. I told them to leave and said I didn't want their investment. My mother started crying. claiming she always knew letting me go to college would backfire, but didn't expect it so soon. She kept crying on my couch, whining about how I had embarrassed them. She blamed my father for paying for my education, saying it made me arrogant and proud. According to her, if I hadn't gone to college and had just looked for a husband, I would have a family by now. Instead, I'm still single in my 30s. She thought my father should have never entertained the idea of investing in my business. It became clear they were here only to control me again. They didn't care about me or my business, just about appearances. They argued in front of me like I wasn't there. Finally, I had enough. I told them to get out or I'd call the cops. My mother cried even more hysterically, saying it was wrong to threaten my parents. I couldn't deal with it anymore, so I physically removed my parents from my apartment. I work out, and I'm pretty tall, and they didn't see it coming, so it was easy to push them out and slam the door shut. They left, and I thought it was over. But a couple of hours later, my brother called, furious and threatening to sue. He claimed I had harmed our parents and owed them an apology. He said this wasn't how to treat the people who raised me and made me capable of getting to this position. I thought it was ridiculous because I had been gentle, and I don't think they got hurt. Plus, it's not illegal to push people out of your own apartment. Now, the family is all up in arms, saying they'll sue if I don't apologize. I'm tired of dealing with all the hate and can't figure out what they're so mad about. I don't know what to do right now. Update 1. Hey everyone, it's been a week since my parents visited, and I kicked them out, and my brother went all moral police on me. My relatives have started a full-blown hate campaign against me online, and it's been a tough week. I was considering apologizing just to stop the hate, but after talking to my partner and reading her comments, I realized it wouldn't stop. They'd find something else to hate me for. Also, apologizing could be seen as an admission of guilt, making it easier for them to sue. So, apologizing is off the table. I think the only thing I can do now is block them all and hope it dies down soon, because I can't take the stress. Many of you asked why I stayed in touch with them after they treated me badly during my childhood. I don't have a clear answer. I guess it was nice to have a family because they weren't outright cruel all the time. We had a few good moments, and that's what I stayed for. But my brother and I never had a relationship, and I'm glad to be rid of him. His move to get our parents to back out of my business when all the work was done was pure evil genius. I have to applaud him for it because it was a devastatingly cruel plan. Update 2. I decided to talk to my partner about what to do next regarding my parents. I was afraid the posts my relatives were making would reach my business associates and harm our image, but he told me to ignore it and pretend it never happened. He said they would eventually stop hating me and go back to their own lives when they saw it wasn't bothering me. So, that's what I'm going to do. A lot of you suggested I make a post or respond to them, but I don't think that's necessary. It would just lead to more drama. I want to focus on my work and move on with my life. Even though getting in trouble with my family doesn't mean much to me, it's still distracting, and I don't need that right now. In other news, my brother contacted me from a different number because I blocked him 3 years ago. I decided to find out what he had been up to since then. I had told my friends not to tell me about him when I cut my family off, but now I'm curious. The last time I heard about him was just after the fight with my parents. He was still working in my dad's company back then. Recently, I asked a couple of friends if they knew what he had been up to. They told me he was still working there, which is crazy because he hasn't moved up in all these years. That's kind of pathetic. They also mentioned that my dad's company is about to be acquired, which could be why he approached me. He might want to feel useful again. My mom wanted to keep me under control, which would be easier if they had a stake in my business. But whatever, that's none of my business. I was just curious. They can do whatever they want. Update 3. It's been almost a month since my first post. I posted a couple of updates in the following days, but then I got really busy. There wasn't much to say since my relatives stopped their hate campaign once they realized I wasn't going to respond. My parents and brother didn't try to reach out again, probably because they knew I wasn't going to apologize. I didn't have anything to apologize for. I just did what anyone in their right mind would have done. So that's it with my family. By the way, my dad's company got acquired. I heard about it a few days ago from a friend. They made a big deal out of it, even throwing a party to celebrate. But they might not realize that my brother could lose his job in the long run. I can't imagine him being competent. The only reason he has his job is because my dad was in charge. Once that changes, who knows what will happen? It'll be interesting if he gets laid off. I'd love to see how they handle that. I know it's wrong to rejoice in someone else's failure, but I'd love to watch my brother fail. Until then, he can watch me succeed. I hope they keep track of me because I'm only going to get bigger and richer. They better watch out. On a lighter note, many of you asked if my partner, and I had a thing. It's cute that people want to find love in everything, but we are just good friends. However, I do have a boyfriend, and we've been together for a couple of years. I didn't mention it because it didn't seem relevant, and I was caught up with the whole fiasco with my parents. But yes, we've been together for a while, and things are going great. My parents don't know about him, obviously, but we're thinking about getting married in a year or so, and guess who won't be invited to that wedding? Lol. My parents had the chance to be decent human beings, but they screwed it up, as they do with most things.